Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. Yeah, I know part 2 of this is a bit late, but October was a bit of a busy month. Anyway, let's continue as Felfop and myself dismantle Jess Phillips.
And so to our agency to change this, I turn to the report of the Domestic Violence APPG in conjunction with the report on the motion today from Women's Aid, and I would ask the Minister here today to give us some assurances about what we are actually going to do about this.
You know, it was about 1.5 years ago that I was completely scared to death that my son was dead. I had no clue where he was, and I knew he was in the hands of an abusive woman that happened to be his biological mother, and she happened to lie about me, and it stopped the system from telling me where he was, what was going on. It allowed her to hide him from everybody who gave a shit.
Yeah, but Felfop, you're missing an important element here, and that is, according to people like Jess, you're the wrong gender to actually be a victim. Your only role is as a perpetrator, based purely on your gender. Jess has a real hard time understanding that women can actually do bad things, and that these bad things can actually affect the lives of men.
Please make sure that these laws that you're making aren't one-sided when it comes to gender. You know they won't do that.
I love warm words. I say them myself. I want hard actions. Myself and the Right Honourable Member for Basingstoke had attempted to begin this conversation with the previous Justice Secretary. However, politics is a fickle game, and so it now falls to a fresh Justice Secretary to make her mark on the job. And I think it is important to state that currently we could be considered to be breaking the law on these issues in the UK. As a member, currently, for now, of the European Union, we sign up to specific directives on protecting victims.
Unless they're male, of course, in which case, they can just go fuck themselves, right, Jess? Only female victims count, right, Jess? Okay, continue.
And one directive explicitly states that we will uphold the protection of victims within our court system, and contact with offenders must be avoided, and therefore in all new court buildings that are built, chance to be a fine thing at the moment, must have separate waiting areas as an example of that. Every single day in the UK we are breaching that. We will hear today about victims who are not just in the same waiting area, as we have already heard, but are allowed to be cross-examined, even bullied, by the very people who have abused them for years.
Do you see how insidious this is, Bane? This is sneaky as fuck, ain't it?
Look, I can understand if someone is an actual victim, having to be cross-examined by the person who victimised them. I can understand that would be traumatic, but we have to allow people the right to defend themselves. When they've been accused of something, they should have the right to face their accuser and defend themselves. This is a really basic principle of the law.
Yeah, exactly. She's basically gone in there and said, in a roundabout way, that people accused shouldn't be allowed to defend themselves. This is civil court she's talking about, not criminal court. So the standards are different. The accuser also gets a chance to examine the accused in a similar manner. This is the law. Or they have attorneys do it if they can afford it, but frequently people don't. That's just how this goes.
Yeah, exactly right. So what happens if someone is accused of something? They can't afford a lawyer, and according to Jess, they shouldn't be allowed to face their accuser. What should they do? Just be thrown in jail automatically? I mean, it's ludicrous. I can understand concern about the well-being of actual victims, but when we throw out the very principle of the law, what happens is we just create a whole new group of victims. We make it easy for someone to victimize someone else and use the law to do it.
Right? She doesn't offer any solution. Her best solution is an inference that due process should be done away with. But beyond that, what she offered up. Beyond that, what she really said.
Yeah, but Felfop, you're missing some key points here. I mean, obviously, due process afforded to a man who has been accused of something by a woman, clearly that's some form of male privilege or something. Or it's the patriarchy trying to stop an obviously guilty man, because he's male, from being punished for, being male. And obviously we all know that a woman during a divorce would never ever lie or try to get revenge on her ex. I mean, it just would never happen. It's never happened in the history of mankind, and it never will in any way, shape or form happen, because apparently women are some kind of superior form of human being who never do any evil human type things like those evil men do. I mean, this is all feminism 101, dude. I mean, where have you been? You haven't been paying attention, have you? I mean, go watch some Lacey Green or something.
In the criminal courts, this would be considered a severe breach of human rights. It would also completely fly in the face of the achieving best evidence standards, and most likely the evidence would be thrown out. We don't allow, and for years we all campaigned, people in this place, before they were in this place, campaigned to have children taken into video rooms. We had partitions, we had separate waiting rooms. Those things have all happened. A quarter of the women surveyed by Women's Aid were found to have been directly cross-examined in the family courts by their abuser.
Yeah, up until now, Jess has been fairly good about using non-gendered language, victim and abuser, even though clearly she's talking about female victims and male abusers. But now she's come right out and said it. In her mind, the word female is synonymous with the word victim, and the word male is synonymous with the word abuser. And when a male is accused of something, that automatically makes him a guilty abuser.
This issue is rising as a direct result of the cessation of legal aid and the rising number of citizens acting as litigants in person. When I asked the Justice Department a number of months ago for figures on the number of litigants in person in the civil and family courts, I was told that they don't monitor that information. Might I gently suggest, because I'm in a good mood because they've done something good today, that the Justice Minister, that is simply not good enough. We have to look at trends and what is happening in our courts.
Yeah, so basically what they seem to be asking is for more money and do research. I completely agree with the research side of it, and I agree that it would be ideal if every single person in family court was represented by an attorney paid for by the state. That'd be great, but fiscally I don't know if that's actually feasible or not. Seems to not be here in the States anyway.
I want also to make the point that, and there is a pervasive myth that family courts are unfairly biased towards mothers. I think we will hear today all sorts of examples of why that is not the case.
Yeah, the way she fudges the statistics in a minute is truly amazing. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. She's not just fucking anti-father and not just full of shit and lying. But here you've got somebody who said that men shouldn't have the ability to discuss their rights on National Men's Day in Parliament because there's not an equal number of women as there is to men in Parliament. Yet the disparity is comparable with the number of divorced or unwed fathers compared to divorced or unwed mothers in the United Kingdom. Yet she will say the system is not biased against these fathers. The parliament system that you have to struggle and fight and do all this badass shit to even get into, that's biased against women because there's not an equal number of women there. But being a father and having equal access to your kids, that's not biased because, men suck.
Well, you see, that's the problem when somebody views the world through the feminist lens, which is basically seeing that women are oppressed and males of a dominant class. When you see things only in that way, you come out with a very biased view of the world. For example, like you said, Felfop, there are more men in Parliament, therefore it must be patriarchy, it must be discrimination, keeping women out of Parliament. Yet when we have more women graduating university and doing better in schools, that's not discrimination. No, that's just women are better at school or women are more intelligent. It has nothing to do with boys being held back in any way. Of course not. And like you said in your example, when we have a court system which is clearly biased in the favour of mothers and against fathers, that's not really discrimination because, you can't discriminate against men. We all know that. Discrimination can only be by men towards women. We've learnt that. I've watched Lacey Green videos, unfortunately. So it has to be some other explanation, like, I don't know, fathers just don't want kids, or they're all abusers, or some nonsense like that. Yeah, and we see it with the homeless issue as well. The majority of the homeless are men. So maybe we could conclude that men don't always have it good. Maybe there's certain things in society which are against men. But of course not. Of course not. Looking at the world through the feminist lens, the fact that the majority of the homeless are male, well, it's just their fault, right? Couldn't be that society doesn't give a shit about men when they fail. Of course not, because that would contradict the narrative.
And that, doesn't matter how many times you scale up the building dressed as Spider-Man, women are still badly treated in our family court system. This is especially pertinent when it comes to those with a history of domestic violence. The Domestic Violence APPG inquiry found that there is no evidence to suggest that it is the case that women are favoured. On average, only 1% of applicants to family courts in the UK have access to refused. Only 1% are told that they can no longer see their children.
Well, Bane, I'm sure me and you are both going to go after this in the same direction. Yeah, only 1% get completely refused, but how about all the guys that get screwed down to 2 days every month? How about those guys? How about the guys that get their kids only a tiny fraction of the time they were used to spending with their children?
Yes, this is exactly right. She's talking about a very small percentage of men who are told they can't have any access with their kids. But the actual issue is that even when men do have access to their kids, that access is extremely limited. Like you said, 2 days a month, or there might be some fathers who see their kids a couple of times a year if they're lucky. It's hardly 50-50, is it, Jess? You complain that not having 50% of Parliament being female is clearly discrimination, but when fathers don't have 50% custody, well, it's clearly not discrimination. And the way you justify this is being extremely cunning and dishonest with statistics.
And 70% of all cases in front of the family courts are victims of domestic violence.
Victims of domestic violence or accusers of domestic violence? Which is it?
Well, that's a very, very interesting question, isn't it? Now, I've heard the National Organisation for Women claim before that when fathers go for custody, they're only doing it to get revenge on the mother. And to be fair, there is probably a percentage of fathers who do this. But if we are going to be fair, we also have to acknowledge that there are mothers out there who will accuse their ex-husband of being abusive when he's not, simply to get leverage in the family court. Now, it's really simple, right? Both mothers and fathers, both males and females, are capable of doing shitty behaviour. Both men and women are capable of getting really pissed off at their exes and wanting revenge, and unfortunately using their children as pawns. Now, the problem with someone like Jess Phillips is she's more than willing to admit that men can do this, but conveniently ignores the fact that women can do it too. Once again, we have this narrative where men are always the abusers, always the guilty party, and all you need is an accusation because, a court case is too traumatic for anyone, apparently. And women, of course, are always the helpless victims who never do anything wrong and wouldn't possibly make up a story to get revenge on their ex. It would just never happen. Right, Jess?
So 1% of 70% of all cases are told that they can't see their children.
Did you see that, Bane? You see how she twisted that up? There's 70% of the divorce cases have an accusation of domestic violence. Only 1% of the custody cases result in a complete estrangement from one parent. Why aren't these numbers closer to each other? Holy fucking Christ.
In 3/4 of cases where courts have ordered contact with an abusive parent, children suffer further abuse. Some children have even been ordered to have contact with a parent who has committed offences against the children themselves.
Does that include abusive mothers, Jess? I'm just wondering, because you said parent. You didn't say fathers there, you said parent. So, do those statistics include mothers, I'm wondering?
Children have even, as we've heard, been killed as a result of residency arrangements.
They're right about kids being in danger when one of the parents is dangerous. I mean, really, Bane, there's no question about it.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Felfop. When one of the parents is violent or dangerous, then the kids are in danger. Or when both parents are violent and abusive, then the kids are in danger. But the way Jess is presenting it here is male abuser, female victim. She doesn't take into account that most abuse towards children is actually done by the mother. You see, that would be an inconvenient statistic to bring up. That would make it a little bit harder to demonise all fathers and to paint all mothers as the innocent victims. But hold on, sorry, I forgot feminist logic. If a woman does something wrong, even abuses her kids or kills her kids, it's probably the fault of a man somewhere, obviously, or just the patriarchy in general, because women have no responsibility or agency, according to feminists. I see things a little bit different. I actually think that women do have agency and responsibility, because I see women as adults. Most women, anyway.
I want to stress as well that an abusive partner can force a victim into the family court, or in fact any civil court in the UK, as many times as they like. This isn't a judgment you get handed down, your case falls, and then you don't get another bite at the cherry. You can go as many times as you like. You can chase a woman around the country taking the same claim against her, and there is nothing that will stop that.
I find that hard to believe. I'm not an expert on UK family court law, but I find it hard to believe that if you brought somebody to court for the same thing 3 times, that there wouldn't be a contempt of court charge running down the pipes. You know anything about this, Bane?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on UK law either, to be honest, but I imagine that there would be some fathers out there who would abuse the system. It would be unlikely that there's none, right? There must be a percentage of fathers out there who want revenge on their ex-partner and will use the system to do it. It's just that there's also the other side, that mothers often do the same thing. Now, if you started with 50-50 custody as the default, I think that would make things a lot harder. You might still get accusations of abuse, false accusations, that is, in some cases. But the way things are now, they're clearly not working. And the unfortunate thing is that parents, note the word parents here, not fathers, or not just mothers, but parents in general, who use their kids as pawns to get revenge on their ex-partners, are really doing a lot of damage to those children. It really is a fucking messy situation. Unfortunately, just assuming that all fathers are guilty and all mothers are innocent victims isn't really fixing the problem.
There is no doubt that in many cases, violent perpetrators use the family court system not to get their children, but to continue stalking and continue a reign of terror. The Domestic Violence APPG have 7 recommendations that will dramatically improve the lives of women. They fall almost exclusively in line with the report from Women's Aid. And we want to see victims and children protected and respected in our courts, and at the very least to the same level that we have in our criminal courts.
So you've got this woman's organization and this woman's organization saying that this should be pro-women. Bane, how do we even end up looking at this lady? Oh. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I'm the dumb fuck that brought you the video. Jess Phillips. Always good for a laugh, huh? Makes one feel blessed to not live in the UK, huh? Yeah.
I have a copy of the recommendations that I can hand over to the ministers today, and I really hope that the ministers here will listen to what they are hearing here today and act as some of their colleagues have today, to do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Melanie, on.
Of course you want the people to listen and believe. That's what you started your speech with, and that's what you're going to end it with. You got anything to say to her, Bane? Light her up.
Well, there are a number of issues here. The first one is the fact that Jess Phillips sees women as victims and men as perpetrators, when in fact the opposite can be true as well. And clearly, even though Jess is elected to Parliament to represent everyone in her electorate, both men and women, she clearly is only interested in looking after the interests of women. Not to mention her interesting interpretation of statistics, where she leaves bits out to try to make an argument against what is clearly discrimination against fathers. Because obviously, that's an impossibility. Discrimination obviously can't happen to men because the men are the ones in power, right? Now, I've got no problem with women in politics. I do, however, have a problem with this type of feminist in politics. Now, if you're not subscribed to Felfop's channel, I highly recommend that you look below, click on the link, and go do so now. He does a lot of stuff on fathers' rights, but he also does a lot of very funny parodies, like this, for example.
There have been something like 5,000 tweets, pretty much
that,
referring to raping you or not raping you.
Yeah, I mean, their level of discourse is that they're saying that they don't want to rape me, as if raping is something that they do to someone they like.
I'm myself, I want you to dump me.